The spoon made soft circles against the ceramic mug, a rhythmic sound that somehow kept me tethered to reality. Around and around. The coffee had gone cold 10 minutes ago, but I couldn't stop stirring. "Daddy, did you hear me?" My son Oliver's voice seemed to come from underwater, 7 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, chocolate milk mustache on his upper lip. He looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes, the same green as mine. "I heard you, buddy," I managed, though my voice sounded like someone else's. "So is it true? Is Mommy really having Jake's baby?" The spoon trembled. I set it down carefully, precisely, as if the entire universe depended on that simple action. Through the kitchen window, I could see my wife Sarah in the backyard, on the phone, laughing. That musical laugh I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. "Where did you hear that, Oliver?" "Last night. I got up to get water and Mommy was on the phone in her office. She said, 'Jake, I can't believe we're having a baby.' She sounded really happy, Daddy." I nodded slowly, mechanically. "Finish your breakfast, son. We don't want to be late for school." Oliver shrugged and returned to his cereal, the moment already forgotten in the way only children can forget. But I would remember. Every detail was crystallizing in my mind with painful clarity. Jake Morrison, 32, ambitious, handsome in that effortless way some men are. He'd joined our family's commercial real estate firm 8 months ago. Sarah had insisted we hire him, said he had fresh perspective. I was the CFO, she handled acquisitions. Jake worked directly under her. I'd noticed the late meetings, the new perfume, the way she started going to the gym at 5 a.m. Classic signs. But I'd buried my head in spreadsheets and parent-teacher conferences, choosing willful blindness over painful truth. The kitchen door opened. Sarah walked in, still glowing from her phone call, her blonde hair catching the morning light. She was beautiful. 39 and still stunning, and pregnant with another man's child. "Morning, honey," she said, kissing the top of Oliver's head. She moved toward me and I turned my face so her lips caught my cheek instead of my mouth. "You okay?" "You look pale," she said, her brow furrowing with what might have been genuine concern. "Didn't sleep well," I replied. "Big audit coming up." She nodded, already distracted, checking her phone. "I have an early meeting. Can you drop Oliver at school?" "Of course." I watched her gather her things, this stranger wearing my wife's face. She paused at the door, turned back with a soft smile. "Love you, Thomas." "Love you too," I said automatically, the words ash in my mouth. After she left, I sat there for a long moment, staring at my cold coffee. Then I stood, rinsed my cup, and helped Oliver with his backpack. We drove to school, in companionable silence, and I hugged him a little tighter than usual at drop-off. "Daddy, you're squishing me," he laughed. "Sorry, buddy, have a great day." Back in my car, I didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a note app. At the top, I typed, "Things I know for certain." Below it, I began my list. Sarah is pregnant. She told Jake he's the father. They've been having an affair for at least several months. I have a son who needs protection from this chaos. I have a family business that needs protection from whatever Jake's really after, because that's what was beginning to crystallize in my mind. Jake hadn't just stumbled into our company. Sarah handled acquisitions, yes, but I controlled the finances, and my late father had structured the business in a specific way. His inheritance, $50 million in property holdings, would fully transfer to me on my 40th birthday, which was in 3 months. But if Sarah divorced me before then, community property laws meant she'd get half of everything, including that inheritance. Jake wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was planning to steal my legacy. I started the car and pulled out of the school parking lot, but I didn't drive to the office. Instead, I headed downtown to see Marcus Chen, my oldest friend and the best attorney in the state. The revenge wouldn't be hot or impulsive. It would be cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating. It would start with a spoon stirring coffee and end with me walking away from the wreckage with my son and my dignity intact. Marcus Chen's office occupied the top floor of the tallest building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. We'd been friends since college, roommates who'd stayed close through marriages, careers, and life's various storms. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was Marcus. "Thomas, you look terrible," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "What's going on?" I told him everything. Oliver's innocent revelation, Sarah's phone call, my suspicions about Jake. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back and steepled his fingers. "First question, are you certain about the pregnancy?" Oliver has no reason to lie or make things up. He's 7. He reported exactly what he heard. Second question, what do you want? Divorce? Custody? To expose them? All of the above? I'd been asking myself the same thing during the drive over. I want my son protected. I want to understand the full scope of their plan, and I want them to face consequences, not from my anger but from their own actions catching up to them. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we need to be smart. If Sarah's pregnant and planning to divorce you before your birthday, she's probably already consulted an attorney. We need information before we make any moves. He paused. I have a friend who runs a private investigation firm. Discreet, thorough, fast. Do it, I said without hesitation. Thomas, this won't be cheap, and once you know everything, you can't unknow it. Are you sure? I thought of Oliver asking about his mother's baby, about stirring that cold coffee while my world ended. I'm already living in the ruins, Marcus. I just need to map the damage. By that afternoon, I was meeting with Diana Reeves, a former FBI agent who now ran her own investigation company. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no nonsense. Your attorney briefed me, she said. I'll need access to your wife's schedule, her usual haunts, and anything you can tell me about Jake Morrison. I'll also need authorization to monitor your shared accounts and credit cards. Whatever you need, I said, signing the paper she slid across the table. One more thing, Diana added. You need to act completely normal at home. Can you do that? Can you sit across from your wife at dinner, share a bed with her, and pretend, nothing's changed, could I? The thought made my stomach turn, but then I pictured Oliver, innocent and oblivious, needing at least one parent who wasn't living a lie. Yes, I said firmly. I can do that. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went to work, reviewed financial reports, attended meetings. At home, I asked Sarah about her day, helped Oliver with homework, and slept beside my wife while imagining her carrying another man's child. She never suspected. That was almost worse. How easily she compartmentalized, how naturally the lies came. When she left for late meetings, I knew she was with Jake. When she claimed exhaustion at 8 p.m., I knew it was morning sickness. On Thursday evening, Diana called. We need to meet, tonight. I've found something you need to see. I told Sarah I was meeting a client. She barely looked up from her laptop. Diana's office was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and modern technology. She had a laptop open with multiple windows displayed on a large monitor. Your instincts were correct, she said without preamble. Jake Morrison isn't who he claims to be. She pulled up a document. Real name Jacob Moretti. He's been involved in several fraudulent real estate schemes on the East Coast. Nothing he was convicted for. He's careful. But there's a pattern. He gets close to people in family businesses, particularly through romantic relationships, gains access to sensitive information, and then either manipulates acquisitions or creates situations where he profits from insider knowledge. My hands clenched. How did he get past our background check? He uses a cleaned-up identity. Different last name, altered employment history. It's sophisticated enough to pass standard checks but not a deep investigation. Diana clicked to another window showing surveillance photos. Jake and Sarah entering a hotel, kissing in a parking garage, having lunch at an expensive restaurant downtown. The affair has been ongoing for 7 months, Diana continued. But here's where it gets interesting. She pulled up financial records. Jake has been systematically gathering information about your family's business structure. He's photographed documents from your wife's home office, copied files from her laptop when she's been in the shower at hotels. How do you know all this? Because he's been sloppy with his own security, I hacked his cloud storage. She smiled thinly. Don't worry. Nothing I've obtained this way is admissible in court, but it tells us what we're dealing with. And it gives us leverage. She showed me email exchanges between Jake and a third party, someone named Richard Voss, apparently a competitor in the commercial real estate market. They were discussing my family's upcoming acquisitions, confidential information only Sarah would have access to. He's not just having an affair, I said quietly. He's committing corporate espionage. Exactly. And there's more. Diana opened another file. I obtained a copy of Jake's recent search history and document downloads. He's been researching community property laws in this state, specifically how they apply to inheritances received during marriage. He knows about your birthday, Thomas. He knows about the $50 million. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He got Sarah pregnant on purpose. That would be my assessment. A child creates a permanent connection, gives him leverage. And if she divorces you before your birthday, with a child on the way by another man, most judges would be sympathetic to her. She'd likely get primary custody of Oliver, too. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. What's the timeline? When do you think they plan to move? Based on communications I've intercepted, Sarah has an appointment with a divorce attorney next Tuesday. The pregnancy is probably about 10 weeks along. They're planning to go public with the relationship after the divorce is filed, but before she starts showing significantly. So I have less than a week. To do what? Diana asked. I turned back to her. To protect my son, save my company, and ensure they both get exactly what they deserve. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. The three of us sat around Diana's conference table, and I laid out my plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. We wouldn't just expose the affair. We'd expose the fraud, the corporate espionage, and Jake's true identity. But we'd do it in a way that protected Oliver from the worst of the fallout and positioned me as the wronged party who'd taken the high road. This will work, Marcus said when I finished. It's risky, but it'll work. When do we start? Diana asked. I checked my watch. It was almost midnight. In 6 hours, Oliver would wake up for school. Sarah would kiss his head and leave for her early meeting, and I would continue stirring my coffee, the perfect picture of an oblivious husband, while setting the pieces in motion for their downfall. We start now, I said. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence or planning the logistics. The hardest part was acting normal while carrying the weight of everything I knew. Every smile Sarah gave me felt like a knife. Every time she touched me casually, a hand on my shoulder, a kiss goodbye, I had to suppress the urge to flinch. But I was getting good at the performance. Too good, perhaps. You seem better this week, Sarah said over dinner on Friday night. Oliver was at his friend's house for a sleepover. More relaxed. The audit's going well, I replied, taking a sip of wine. And I've been thinking, we should plan a family vacation. Maybe Hawaii? Oliver's been asking about the beach. Her face flickered with something, guilt, worry, before smoothing into a smile. That sounds lovely. Maybe this winter. Perfect. I'll look into resorts. I reached across the table and took her hand. She squeezed back, and I wondered how she could sit there, pregnant with her lover's child, and still play this role so convincingly. That night, while Sarah slept beside me, I received a text from Diana. Package delivered. Check your email. In the email was a detailed dossier on Jake Morrison, or rather Jacob Moretti. Every fraudulent scheme, every alias, every woman he'd manipulated. But more importantly, Diana had uncovered something even I hadn't suspected. Jake had a partner. Not Richard Voss, the competitor, that was just business. No, Jake had a wife. Still legally married, living in Boston with their 2 children. The affair with Sarah wasn't just betrayal and corporate espionage. It was bigamy in waiting. I smiled in the darkness. This changed everything. Saturday, I told Sarah I needed to go into the office for a few hours. Instead, I met with Marcus at his house, away from any potential surveillance. This is the nuclear option, Marcus said, reviewing the information about Jake's wife. Once we reveal this, there's no going back. Good, I replied. I don't want to go back. We spent the day refining the plan. Marcus would prepare divorce papers. Ironically, I'd file first with full evidence of Sarah's affair and misconduct. But we wouldn't file them until the perfect moment. Meanwhile, Diana had arranged something special, a corporate board meeting for Tuesday morning. The same day Sarah had her divorce attorney appointment. Every board member of our family company would be present, including my Uncle Robert, who technically owned 30% of the shares. Your uncle doesn't know about any of this? Marcus asked. No, he's been semi-retired in Arizona, but he'll fly in for an emergency board meeting. And Jake and Sarah will be there? Sarah has to be, she's VP of Acquisitions. And I'll personally invite Jake, telling him we're discussing his promotion to senior partner. Marcus whistled low. You're going to expose them in front of the entire board? Not just expose them. I'm going to present evidence of corporate espionage and Jake's true identity. I'm going to show how Sarah's been leaking confidential information, compromising our deals with competitors. And then, I paused. Then I'm going to introduce them to Jake's wife, who Diana is flying in from Boston. Jesus, Thomas. They tried to steal my legacy, Marcus. They tried to destroy my family. I'm just returning the favor. Sunday was Oliver's turn. I took him to the park, just the two of us, and we threw a baseball back and forth while I tried to memorize every detail. His laughter, his concentration when he caught a hard throw, the way he talked nonstop about everything and nothing. Dad? He asked during a break for ice cream. Are you and Mom okay? My heart seized. What makes you ask that, buddy? He shrugged, swirling his spoon in melting chocolate. I don't know. You seem sad sometimes, and Mom's always on her phone. I pulled him close, this perceptive, wonderful kid who deserved so much better than what was coming. Sometimes adults have complicated problems, I said carefully. But I want you to know something, Oliver. No matter what happens, you're the best thing in my life. Nothing will ever change that. He hugged me tight. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Always. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I dressed carefully. My best suit, the tie Sarah had bought me for our 10th anniversary. Ironic but fitting. At breakfast, I made Oliver's favorite pancakes while Sarah rushed around gathering her things. I have back-to-back meetings all day, she said, barely looking up from her phone, including dinner with a client tonight. Can you handle Oliver's bedtime? Of course, I said. Good luck with your meetings. She kissed Oliver absently and was gone. I dropped Oliver at school, then drove to the office. My secretary Jane looked surprised when I asked her to clear my schedule for Tuesday morning. But you have the quarterly review with... Reschedule everything, I said firmly, and make sure conference room A is reserved for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Board meeting. Her eyes widened. Board meetings were rare and always significant, but she nodded. In my office, I reviewed the presentation Diana had prepared. 40 slides of evidence, timelines, financial discrepancies, and surveillance photos. Everything documented, verified, and devastating. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Thinking about you. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, You too. 3 little letters. Such an easy lie. That evening, Jake called me. Thomas, hey. Sarah mentioned you wanted to talk about my future with the company. That's right, Jake. Can you be at the office tomorrow, 9 a.m.? Emergency board meeting. We're discussing some structural changes, and I want you there. Might be good news for you? Absolutely. I'll be there. Thanks for thinking of me, Thomas. You're a good man. I hung up without responding to that last part. At home that night, I tucked Oliver into bed and read him extra chapters from his current favorite book. He fell asleep with his head on my shoulder, and I sat there for a long time, just watching him breathe. Sarah came home late, smelling of Jake's cologne, and slipped into bed beside me. How was your client dinner? I asked in the darkness. Exhausting, she murmured, but productive. I turned to face her. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, I could just make out her features, this woman I'd loved for 15 years, who was carrying another man's child while planning to steal my inheritance. Sarah, I said softly, do you remember our wedding vows? She tensed slightly. Of course, why? I was just thinking about them, for better or worse, in good times and bad. We meant those words, didn't we? Yes, she whispered. We did. Good, I said. I just wanted to make sure. I rolled over and closed my eyes, a small smile on my face. Tomorrow, every promise would be tested. Every lie would be exposed. Every scheme would unravel, and I would finally stop stirring my coffee in silence. Tuesday morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I was up before sunrise making coffee and reviewing the presentation one final time. Every slide was a nail in their coffin, every piece of evidence meticulously documented. Oliver came downstairs at 7 a.m. rubbing his eyes. "You're up early, Dad." "Big day at work, buddy." I poured him orange juice and made his breakfast. "Grandma's going to pick you up from school today, okay? She's taking you for ice cream and to that new arcade you wanted to try." His face lit up. My mother didn't know the full details, but I'd called her yesterday and asked her to take Oliver for the evening. She'd heard something in my voice, a mother always knows, and agreed without questions. Sarah emerged at 7:30, already dressed and polished. She barely glanced at her breakfast. "I have an appointment this morning at 9, she said. "I'll be in by 10:30, her divorce attorney." "Right on schedule." "Actually," I said casually, "I need you at the office by 9. Emergency board meeting. Uncle Robert flew in from Arizona. It's mandatory attendance for all executives." She froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "What? Thomas, I can't. I have something important. More important than a board meeting that determines company strategy." I kept my voice light, curious. "Sarah, Uncle Robert's only here for today. Whatever you have scheduled, reschedule it." I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. She couldn't refuse without raising suspicion, but her divorce filing depended on that 9 a.m. appointment. "Fine," she said tightly. "I'll move my appointment to this afternoon." "Perfect." I kissed Oliver's head. "Come on, buddy. Let's get you to school." At 8:45 a.m., I stood outside conference room A, watching board members file in. Uncle Robert arrived first, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw me. "Thomas, my boy, what's this emergency about?" "You'll see, Uncle Robert. Trust me, this concerns the future of the company." Marcus arrived next, carrying his briefcase, looking every inch the high-powered attorney. Then Diana Reeves, whom I introduced as an independent security consultant. At 8:50, Jake strutted in, confident and smiling, wearing an expensive suit I knew my company had indirectly paid for. He shook my hand firmly. "Ready for some good news?" I asked. "Always," he laughed. Sarah arrived at 8:55, slightly breathless, her eyes scanning the room nervously. She avoided looking at Jake. Good instincts, but too late. And finally, at 8:58, Diana escorted in a woman I'd only seen in photographs. Michelle Morrison, Jake's actual wife. 35, attractive, wearing a simple dress and carrying a diaper bag. She looked tired and confused but determined. Jake went white when he saw her. "What, Michelle, what are you doing here?" he stammered. "Thomas invited me," she said quietly. "He called me 2 days ago. Told me some very interesting things about my husband's business trip." Sarah was staring at Michelle, at Jake, at me. Understanding was dawning in her eyes, along with something that looked like panic. "Everyone, please sit," I said calmly. "We have a lot to cover." I stood at the head of the conference table, remote control in hand. The large screen behind me flickered to life. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. This meeting concerns corporate espionage, financial fraud, and the protection of our family's business. Uncle Robert, board members, what I'm about to show you represents a serious breach of trust at the highest levels of our company." I clicked to the first slide. It showed Jake's photo alongside his real identity documents. This is Jacob Moretti, not Jake Morrison. He's used multiple aliases across several states in connection with real estate fraud schemes. He was hired 8 months ago after our VP of Acquisitions, my wife Sarah, vouched for him personally. Sarah stood abruptly. "Thomas, what is this?" "Sit down, Sarah." My voice was steel. "You'll have your chance to speak." She sat, looking at Marcus helplessly. He stared back impassively. I continued through the slides. Jake's fraudulent history, the surveillance photos of him and Sarah together, the documented affair. I watched Uncle Robert's face grow thunderous, watched the other board members exchange shocked glances. "But the affair, while personally devastating, isn't the real issue here," I said. "The real issue is that Jacob, has been using his relationship with Sarah to gain access to confidential company information, which he's been selling to our competitors." I showed the emails between Jake and Richard Voss, the photocopied documents, the timeline of leaked information corresponding to failed deals and lost acquisitions. "Sarah," I said, turning to my wife, "you're listed on dozens of these documents as the source. Either you were complicit in corporate espionage, or you were so compromised by your personal relationship that you allowed confidential information to be accessed and stolen." "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know he was using you?" I asked. "Or didn't know he was already married?" Jake stood suddenly. "This is ridiculous. Thomas is just angry about— Sit down, Jacob, Michelle said sharply. For once in your miserable life, sit down and shut up. He sat. Michelle looked around the table. My husband told me he was consulting on a project in this city. We have 2 children, ages 3 and 5. I've been taking care of them alone while sending him money because he claimed his consulting fees were delayed. She pulled out her phone. Then Mr. Thomas called me and told me the truth. Showed me evidence. So I got on a plane, got my mother to watch my babies, and came here to see for myself. She turned to Sarah. You're pregnant with my husband's baby? Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. That gesture told everyone in the room everything they needed to know. Oh my God, Uncle Robert breathed. Sarah, tell me this isn't true. Sarah looked around wildly, tears starting to stream down her face. I didn't know he was married. He said he loved me. He said we'd be together. Together with my inheritance, I said quietly. That was always the plan, wasn't it, Jake? Get Sarah pregnant. Convince her to divorce me before my 40th birthday. Take half of everything in the settlement, then disappear with the money. Jake's silence was damning. I clicked to the final slides. Evidence of Sarah's scheduled divorce attorney appointment, research on community property laws, and messages between Jake and an unknown third party discussing the score and planning an exit strategy. Marcus, I said. You're our corporate attorney. What are the legal implications here? Marcus stood, radiating professional authority. The company has grounds to terminate both Jake Morrison and Sarah Thomas for cause. No severance, no benefits. The corporate espionage potentially constitutes criminal fraud, which I've already reported to federal authorities. They'll be opening an investigation. He turned to Jake. Additionally, as Michelle's attorney as of yesterday, I'll be filing for divorce on her behalf and pursuing full custody of their children, along with criminal bigamy charges given your intent to marry Sarah while still legally married. Jake's face was gray. You can't— I can and I am, Michelle said. You destroyed our family, Jake. You destroyed these people's family. For what? Money you'll never see because you're going to prison? I clicked off the presentation and faced Sarah directly. I filed for divorce yesterday afternoon. Full custody of Oliver, citing adultery and moral unfitness. Every board member here will testify to what they've seen today. Marcus has documented everything. Thomas, please, Sarah sobbed. Please, we can fix this. We can— Fix what? I asked. Our marriage? Our family? The company you nearly destroyed? Sarah, you're carrying another man's child. You were planning to steal my inheritance. You compromised every value this company was built on. I paused. You broke Oliver's heart before he even knows it yet. That landed. She crumpled, sobbing into her hands. Uncle Robert spoke up, his voice heavy with disappointment. Sarah, you'll need to resign effective immediately. Jake, you're fired. I'm calling security to escort you both out. And Sarah— He paused, his face softening slightly. I'm sorry it came to this, but you made your choices. Security arrived within minutes. Jake went quietly, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Michelle followed, her head held high. She paused at the door. Mr. Thomas, she said, thank you for telling me the truth. I hope you and your son will be okay. Thank you, Michelle. I hope the same for you and your children. Sarah was the last to leave. At the door, she turned back to me. Thomas, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't even know how it all went so wrong. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but a faint, distant sadness for what we'd once been. You made it wrong, I said. One choice at a time. After they left, the conference room was silent. Finally, Uncle Robert spoke. Well, he said, that was quite possibly the most uncomfortable meeting I've ever attended. But Thomas, you handled it with more grace than I would have. He paused. How's Oliver? He doesn't know yet. I'll tell him tonight. Age-appropriate version, nothing he can't handle. And you? How are you? I thought about that morning when Oliver said those words. How I'd kept stirring my coffee while my world ended. How I'd spent a week living a lie while planning the truth. I'm okay, Uncle Robert. I'm going to be okay. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it. 3 months had passed since that devastating board meeting. The autumn leaves were falling outside my new apartment, a modern 2-bedroom near Oliver's school, carefully chosen for its proximity to his friends and familiar places. I'd wanted to minimize the disruption to his life, even as everything else changed. I stood at the kitchen counter making coffee. The ritual had become meditative again rather than traumatic. The spoon stirred in gentle circles, but this time I was present, aware, alive in the moment rather than frozen in shock. "Dad, can I have chocolate chip pancakes?" Oliver bounded into the kitchen, wearing his favorite dinosaur pajamas. It was Saturday, our weekend together, and he'd adapted to the new schedule better than I'd dared hope. "Absolutely, buddy. You want to help me make them?" "Yeah." He dragged his step stool to the counter and we worked together, measuring flour and cracking eggs. He chattered about school, his friends, the science project he was planning. Normal. Beautiful. 7-year-old concerns. We'd had the talk about the divorce 6 weeks ago. I'd kept it simple. Mom and Dad love you very much, but sometimes adults realize they're better as friends than as married people. Nothing that happened is your fault, and we're both always going to be your parents. He'd cried a little, asked if it was because of the baby, and I'd told him a version of the truth. The baby is part of why things got complicated, but the most important thing is that you're loved, you're safe, and your life is going to be good. Children are resilient. Oliver had proven that every day. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Settlement finalized. Documents ready for your signature." The divorce had moved quickly once everything came to light. Sarah hadn't fought custody. She couldn't, not with the evidence and the board testimony. She'd resigned from the company, sold her shares back to the family trust, and moved to a smaller house across town. The baby, her baby with Jake, was due in 3 months. She'd reached out twice asking if Oliver could meet his half-sibling eventually. I'd told her we'd cross that bridge when we came to it, but privately I doubted it. Some damage was too deep, some betrayals too complete. Jake was facing federal fraud charges. Michelle had gotten her divorce, full custody, and was rebuilding her life in Boston with help from a generous settlement funded partly by seized assets from Jake's schemes. We'd exchanged a few emails, two people who'd survived the same con artist finding odd solidarity and shared experience. The doorbell rang. Oliver ran to answer it, and I heard his excited voice. "Uncle Marcus." Marcus had become a regular presence in our lives, filling some of the gaps left by the divorce. He walked into the kitchen carrying a box of fancy donuts. "Breakfast supplementation," he announced. "I figured pancakes needed backup." "They definitely do," I said, grateful for his friendship. "Coffee? Please." We sat at my small dining table while Oliver demolished pancakes and donuts with equal enthusiasm. Marcus and I talked about the settlement, about my upcoming birthday, now just 2 weeks away, and about the future. "The inheritance transfer's clean," Marcus said. "No complications, no claims from Sarah. It's all yours as your father intended." "I've been thinking about that," I said. "I want to set up a trust for Oliver. Education, medical, everything he might need. And I want to establish a foundation in my father's name. Something focused on business ethics and supporting people who've been victimized by corporate fraud." Marcus smiled. "Your father would be proud." And Michelle Morrison's name came up at a recent legal conference. She's starting an advocacy group for people affected by relationship fraud. Your foundation could partner with her organization. "I like that. Send me the details." After breakfast, Marcus left and Oliver settled in front of a movie. I took my coffee out to the small balcony and looked at the city spread before me. Fall sunshine warmed my face and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. My phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Thomas? It's Sarah." I almost hung up, but something in her voice stopped me. Not manipulation or plea, just exhaustion. "What do you need, Sarah?" "Nothing. I wanted you to know that I'm in therapy. Real therapy, not just for show. And I've been thinking about everything. About how I destroyed our family and nearly destroyed you." "Okay," I said neutrally. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect understanding. But I need you to know that Jake manipulated me, yes, but I made my own choices. I chose the affair. I chose to violate company trust. I chose to believe pretty lies over the good man I was married to." She paused. "And I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you, but because you deserve to hear it." I was quiet for a long moment, watching clouds drift across the sky. "I appreciate that, Sarah. I do. And for what it's worth, I hope you find your way to a better place. Oliver deserves a mother who's healthy and whole even if we're not together." "How is he?" Her voice cracked slightly. "He's good. He's adapting. He's happy more than he's sad, which is all we can ask for." "Can I see him next weekend?" "My scheduled day?" Yes, I'll drop him off at 2 on Saturday. Thank you, Thomas. For everything. For not poisoning him against me. For handling this with so much grace when you had every right to destroy me. I didn't destroy you, Sarah. I just stopped letting you destroy me. There's a difference. We hung up and I sat with my coffee thinking about that morning when Oliver had innocently shattered my world, how I'd kept stirring my coffee, trapped in shock and disbelief. The thing about trauma is that it changes you. You don't go back to who you were before that person is gone. But you can become someone new, someone stronger, someone who's learned that survival isn't just about enduring, but about choosing what comes next. I'd chosen my son. I'd chosen my integrity. I'd chosen a quiet, devastating response over an explosive confrontation. And in doing so, I'd found a kind of strength I didn't know I possessed. Dad, Oliver called from inside. Can we go to the park? Absolutely, buddy. Grab your jacket. As I walked back into the apartment, I glanced at the coffee mug I'd left on the counter. The spoon sat beside it, clean and still. No more endless stirring, no more frozen shock, just forward motion. Just healing. Just life. 2 weeks later, on my 40th birthday, I stood in my father's study, now my study, at the family home that Uncle Robert had decided to deed to me. Oliver was at Sarah's for the evening, and I'd spent the day with close friends and family, celebrating not just the milestone, but everything it represented. The inheritance had transferred. 50 million in property holdings, carefully curated investments, and the security to build whatever future I chose. But more than that, I had my son, my integrity, and the knowledge that I'd faced the worst betrayal and emerged intact. Marcus had left an hour ago, but not before presenting me with a framed photograph. That morning at Oliver's school drop-off, taken by Diana Reeves during her surveillance, I was hugging Oliver tight, his face pressed against my shoulder, and my expression was pure love despite everything I'd been carrying. To remind you, Marcus had said, of what matters most. I stood looking at family photos on the wall, my parents on their wedding day, Oliver as a baby, happier times with Sarah that felt like another lifetime. I'd keep some of those photos for Oliver's sake, for the reminder that his parents once loved each other, even if that love couldn't survive what came after. My phone chimed. A text from Diana. Saw the news about Jake's sentencing. 15 years federal prison. Justice served. I replied, thanks for everything, Diana. Couldn't have done it without you. Her response, you did the hard part. You survived it with grace. That's the real victory. I poured myself a glass of my father's favorite scotch and raised it to the photo on the wall. Thanks, Dad, I said quietly, for teaching me that integrity matters more than revenge, that protecting family is the highest calling, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just keep stirring your coffee until you're ready to act. Outside, the city lights were coming on as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, Sarah was living with her choices. Jake was beginning a long prison sentence. Michelle was rebuilding with her children. And Oliver was probably laughing at some movie Sarah had put on, innocent and loved despite everything. As for me, I set down the scotch glass and walked to my desk where a notebook lay open. At the top of the page, I'd written, things I know for certain, new list. Below it, my son is the best thing in my life. I am stronger than I knew. Betrayal doesn't have to break you. Quiet dignity is more powerful than rage. Some endings are actually beginnings. I will be okay. Better than okay. I closed the notebook and looked out the window at my city, my life, my future. That morning at breakfast, Oliver had shattered my world with innocent words. But I'd picked up the pieces and built something new, something smaller maybe, but truer. More real, more mine. I wasn't the man who'd sat frozen at the breakfast table, mechanically stirring cold coffee while his world ended. I was the man who'd survived the ending and discovered he could create his own new beginning. And tomorrow morning, when I made coffee for Oliver and myself in our peaceful apartment, I'd stir it with purpose, presence, and maybe, just maybe, a quiet smile. Because I'd learned the hardest lesson life could teach, that sometimes keeping your composure in the face of devastation isn't weakness. It's the first step toward winning.